Welcome everyone. Today we're discussing a very pressing issue, the ongoing assault by Israel on the Palestinian people and how this connects to a larger, disturbing pattern of military dominance by Israel. Recently, the Israeli military has been using new weapons like Iron Sting mortar in Gaza. These weapons, created by Elbit System, one of Israel's biggest defense companies, are first tested on Palestinian people, causing civilian devastation, casualties. It goes on and on. Then they're being sold worldwide to countries, including those in Latin America. When Israeli arms have become synonymous with violence against indigenous people and marginalized communities, something has to be done. Because of this, today we're here to break down, in no particular order, how Israel has destroyed lives across Latin America, much like it has in Palestine. So, let's start with Guatemala's Dirty War. During the 1980s, Guatemala witnessed one of the bloodiest civil wars in Latin American history, resulting in the deaths of over 200,000 people, RIP, primarily indigenous people. When the US cut off military aid to Guatemala in 1977 due to human rights violation, this was all done under President Jimmy Carter's administration. Israel stepped in to fill in the void that the US left. By the 1970s, Israel had become Guatemala's main arms provider, selling everything from Gala assault rifles to Arava aircrafts. One Israeli advisor at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Amatzia Shuali, reportedly said, "I don't care what the Gentiles do with the arms. The main thing is that the Jews profit." That reflected the cynical approach Israel took towards the conflict in Guatemala. By the time General Rios Montt came to power in 1982, Israel had not only provided weapons, but also trained elite Guatemalan killing military forces, such as the Kabyles, who were infamous for their brutality. In fact, it was these Israeli trained soldiers who carried out some of the worst massacres during the Civil War, including the Dos Ejes massacre, where the entire village was reportedly annihilated, with survivors being shot or having their skulls smashed with sledgehammers. Absolutely horrendous. Investigators later discovered that the ballistic evidence from the massacre corresponded to the Gala rifles made in Israel, people. You can look all this up, people. It's right there. Israel was involved heavily in Guatemala's civil war and supplying the weapons that annihilated indigenous villages. Now, Israel's involvement didn't stop at arms sales. Why would they? In 1981, Israel financed and designed an electronics school, which, spoiler alert, was not to teach people how to fix radio, in Guatemala, to train military forces in counterinsurgency technology. This helped the G2, Guatemala's secret police, conduct raids, assassinations, and torture campaigns against indigenous communities and left-wing activists. Unfortunately, Guatemala's ties to Israel didn't end in the 1980s. In December of 2017, Guatemala became the second country after the United States to move its embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, further cementing its bond with Israel. It was a clear signal of the strong relationship between the two nations of Guatemala and Israel, built over decades of military and political support. Now, we go from Guatemala to Nicaragua's Contra War. During Nicaragua's Contra War, Israel helped arm and train Nicaraguan Contras, a right-wing paramilitary group backed by the United States. while the US faced restrictions on aiding the Contras, Israel stepped in. Once again, Israel stepped in when the United States couldn't. When Israel stepped in, they supplied arms and training in Honduras and Costa Rica for the Contras. This support led to brutal tactics that targeted civilians, including, once again, indigenous communities. Israel's involvement wasn't just coincidental, it was part of a broader strategy to maintain its influence in Central America. Following the overthrow of the Somoza regime in 1979, which heavily relied on Israeli arms, Israel became increasingly concerned about the stability of its arms markets in the region. Now, when it came to the Iran-Contra Affair, the former prime minister of Israel at the time and other officials were found to be instrumental in initiating shipment of US arms to Iran, with plans to divert profits from these sales to fund the Contras. Congressional reports indicated that Israeli officials even acted to prevent President Reagan at the time, from abandoning these Iranian arms sales, and that the diversion of funds to the Contras was an idea advanced by Israel. The entire Contra affair that we've heard about all through history, in history class and in documentaries, Israel was behind the whole thing. Reports also suggest that the Israelis themselves even shipped arms to the Contras, with one congressional source saying, and listen to this, "I think the Israelis played us like a fine violin." All of this led to the Contras to use the weapons and training, which again were all provided by Israel, to target and execute, say it with me, indigenous communities. Unfortunately, it keeps replaying when Israel is involved. And finally, we go from Nicaragua to Colombia. Now, in Colombia, the Israeli military trained and supplied the AUC paramilitary forces led by Carlos Castellano. Castellano himself said he modeled the AUC after Israeli paramilitary forces. By the late 1980s, Israeli advisors were training Colombian forces to conduct a counterinsurgency campaign that resulted in widespread humanitarian abuses, especially against, and I hate saying it again, indigenous communities, and those suspected of supporting other guerrilla groups. Despite this, Colombia's relationship with Israel has become strained in recent years. In August 2023, Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, heroically, and like it should have been done, cut diplomatic ties with Israel over its treatment of the Palestinian people. Petro condemned the Israeli government's actions in Gaza, leading to this dramatic political move. However, Colombia's military still relies heavily on Israeli military equipment and training, creating a complex situation where diplomatic tensions don't fully serve the military needs. Now, you might be wondering, why was Israel so deeply involved in these violent regimes across Latin America? The answer lies in Israel's broader foreign policy objective. You see, for decades, Israel has been working to break out of its international isolation. As a small state, often marginalized on the global stage, they gotta overcompensate, Israel couldn't afford to be selective about which regime it supported, even if those regimes had brutal human rights records. By offering military support to countries like Guatemala, Israel found allies in places where other nations were unwilling to step in. Additionally, and this is very important, so listen to me when I tell you this, Israel's involvement in Latin America has frequently aligned with the strategic interests of the United States. Without directly relying on Washington's instructions, Israel has often served as an extension of US foreign policy, stepping in when the US could not, or really would not, act due to the political constraints of how this would look on the global stage. This helped Israel gain leverage over Washington's Middle East policy, reinforcing the US-Israeli relationship while expanding its own economic and military influence globally. And videos like this proves it. Watch.
What we're hearing from U.S. sources, Kate, is that Israel has a target list that is, obviously, it seems to be much more aggressive when it comes to regime members and nuclear targets than the United States might like. But I think the key thing to emphasize is that Israel expects and Israel will receive complete U.S. backing after it does whatever it is going to do. So even if the U.S. doesn't like it, they're going to be there on the back end to defend Israel for the consequences of whatever this massive strike and this ongoing war will be. Kate.
At the heart of all of this is Israel's military-industrial complex. Israel became one of the world's top arms exporters, not just to sustain its economy, but also to maintain its military self-sufficiency. Arms export were a way to keep its defense industry alive, develop new technologies, and secure allies. This approach allowed Israel to serve the United States' objectives indirectly while securing crucial political and economic benefits for itself. And now, after seeing how these policies and this need to export military weapons have destroyed lives from Mexico to Palestine, it's clear that both Israel and the United States needs to tone down their military domination on a global scale. They need to stop building more weapons and more army bases. Enough is enough. The world doesn't need more weapons and more violence. We need peace and we need justice. Everyone, whether in the highlands of Guatemala or the streets of Gaza, deserves to be free from oppression. It's time for a global ceasefire and free Palestine. If you found this video informative and impactful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth videos on global discussions like these. Your support means everything. Help us reach a wide audience. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.